very good evening, everyone. I hope you all are doing well. And I welcome you to the first session of In Dialogue Foundation Certificate Course in Dialogue Studies 24-25. I am Pushpika Saxena, a research scholar at University of Lucknow and a volunteer at In Dialogue Foundation. I'm very happy and I really welcome you all for today's first session of your In Dialogue Foundation. Today, we have the pleasure of having Dr. Alp Aslandogan, and I'll give a brief introduction about him. He is the Executive Director of the Alliance for Shared Values, a nonprofit organization that promotes bringing together citizens of diverse backgrounds around shared values of humanity. The Alliance serves as an umbrella of foundations focusing on interfaith and intercultural dialogue in North America, bringing together citizens of Christian, Jewish, Muslim, and other faith backgrounds around meaningful conversations and social responsibility projects. Dr. Aslandogan also serves as the chair of the Integration Committee of the North America Civic Platform, an association of cultural, religious, and humanitarian organizations established by Hizmet Movement participants in North America. Prior to his current position, Dr. Aslandogan served as the president of North American University, an adjunct faculty member of Prairie View A&M University, the board president of the Institute of Interfaith Dialogue, and a board member of the Gulen Institute in Houston, Texas. He is a co-editor of Muslim Citizens of the Globalized World, Contributions of the Gulen Movement, and a co-author of The Messenger, Prophet Muhammad, and His Lives of Compassion. He has served as an author and an editor of the Fountain magazine and as a member of the board of practitioners and scholars of the Journal of Interreligious Dialogue. He published opinions columns on Huffington Post, CNN.com, and Newsweek.com. As the director of Alliance for Shared Values and a translator for Turkish Muslim scholar Fethullah Gulen, the inspiration behind the Hizmet Movement, he was interviewed by PBS, CBS, and Voice of America. He holds a Ph.D. in computer science from the University of Illinois at Chicago. He also did graduate studies at Hartford Seminary in Islamic Studies and Christian Muslim relations. So Dr. Aslandogan will be speaking on the topic today, how dialogue and civic engagement serve social peace. Sir, I really welcome you, and you have up to 2 hours for the session. You may leave as much time for question and discussions as you like. And I remind all the participants that they need to keep their cameras on throughout the session. Sir, floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening again. It is morning for me, so good morning for me. Good evening for you. And it is very delightful to be part of this program. I think when we watch the videos over time, we will also see my progression in age on the videos. But dialogue and civic engagement are really very important values to me. My original background was in computer science, but 12 years ago, I changed my role, became the director of this organization, which focuses on dialogue because I find it meaningful. So I'm very pleased to be with you to share some thoughts and hear your thoughts on this topic. All right, so my organization, as was mentioned, is an umbrella for several organizations in the United States. So they take every opportunity to bring Christians, Jews, Muslims, Hindus, Buddhists, and other members of other faiths around either projects or dinners, different kinds of conversations around the United States. In a typical year, about 100,000 Americans and Canadians of different backgrounds come together. An important portion of these meetings happen during the month of Ramadan, but throughout the year there are many occasions to do that. And information about the organization can be reached at afsv.org, Alliance for Shared Values. The supporters, volunteers of our organization come from the Hizmet Movement, which was mentioned, which is an education movement that started in Turkey in the 60s. And in the 2000s, it reached overall population of over 1 million people. Initially, it was originally an education movement, but then it branched into humanitarian relief and interfaith dialogue and intercultural dialogue. Unfortunately, it has been persecuted for the last 10 years or so by the Turkish president, but it is thriving in the rest of the world, especially in democratic countries. So the topic of this discussion is dialogue and civic engagement. Are they the same? How do they relate to each other? They are very tightly coupled concepts. Whenever there is dialogue, there is civic engagement, and whenever there is civic engagement, there is dialogue. So they intersect to a large extent. There are some aspects that are unique to dialogue and civic engagement. I think it will become, I hope it will become more clear as we go through these concepts. Now, when we say dialogue and civic engagement, in what areas or roles can we engage civically and can we have a dialogue? We are a human first. That is kind of the foundation of our being. We have a human soul, and we are a citizen of a country. We are neighbors. We are parents or children. All of us are both parents and children. Maybe some of us are not parents, but most of us, I should say. We are all children, of course. We have parents. We have a religion, Muslim, Hindu, Christian, Buddhist, whatever. And then we have hobbies and we have a profession. We have interests. So these all present us with areas where we engage in dialogue and civically. Our local community, our professional world, our government, from local government to the country government, the hobby world and the interfaith world, and also social responsibility world, or you can say our nation, our neighborhood. These are all areas where we can engage civically, where we can have dialogues. Now, to understand the value of dialogue and civic engagement, we should also look at what happens when there is no dialogue, when there is no civic engagement. What happens is there's isolation, segregation, separation. For some communities, small minority communities or large minority communities, there's ghettoization. On the part of the majority over the minority, there is discrimination, polarization, social exclusion, and it may sometimes lead to conflicts and even violent conflicts. So it helps to understand a concept when we consider what happens when it is not there. So let's talk about dialogue a little bit. The definition that you are seeing is based on a definition that was published by Journal of Dialogue Studies in UK. That is a partner organization of ours. And this definition is a slight modification of their definition, which you can find online. The Journal of Dialogue Studies in England. So in terms of AFSV and our partners, we define dialogue as any meaningful interaction and exchange among people of different backgrounds, ethnically, socially, culturally, politically, religiously, ideologically, or otherwise, in an atmosphere of equality, tolerance, respect, honesty, openness, sincerity, and courtesy, without imposing our ideas, beliefs, or values upon others, through various kinds of conversations and activities. This is how we define dialogue. These are important aspects because in the absence of some of these aspects, dialogue may not produce the desirable result of developing empathy, developing mutual trust, developing cooperation among people. So this definition is very important to our hearts. Another definition of dialogue is an open and respectful exchange of views between individuals and groups belonging to different cultures that leads to deeper understanding. And we add one more thing to this and say, and possibly to friendships. Again, to understand something, we can also look at its opposite. If this is dialogue, if this is how we understand dialogue, and I hope that you agree to, basically, you agree to this definition, what dialogue is not? Dialogue is not compromise from one's religion. So, which means that if you are in a situation under the topic of dialogue, under the title of dialogue, and you have to compromise from your religion, so that is not proper dialogue. That is not productive dialogue. It is also not an effort to unify religions. People have a lot invested in their religion. They have thought hard. Most of us, most of the people have thought hard, and they felt something, and they are committed to their religion. So trying to unify religions, there are efforts like that. There have been efforts like that, but most of them actually have not succeeded. It is best for people to be left to their own choice and to give them the freedom. And to try to use dialogue as a venue to unify religions is not productive. It is also not a debate. Let me share a personal anecdote about this. When I first engaged in interfaith dialogue in the 90s, when I was a graduate student in Chicago at the University of Illinois, Chicago, we did not know what to do. We did not know anybody. So we went to the local Muslim community center, asked them, are you engaged in interfaith dialogue? We want to be part of it. And the Muslim community center in Chicago is mostly made up of Indian origin Muslims. And there was a brother there who led us to a Muslim lady. I believe her name was Mary Ali or Nancy Ali. I'm not sure right now. And we asked her, she was engaged in dialogue. We asked her, how are your efforts in interfaith dialogue going? And she said, well, it's not very productive. We are engaged in dialogue with Catholics here, but it's not going anywhere because everybody is trying to prove that their religion is right. So this unfortunately sometimes happens. People try to prove in the matter of an hour or two that their religion is the right one, and of course, that's not going to succeed with all the background, with all the accumulation of thoughts and beliefs and feelings about a religion. You're not going to convince somebody in 1 hour that your religion is right. Therefore, it doesn't go anywhere, and it is very naive to think that it might work that way. So dialogue is not a debate. You can express your views, you can express how you think, how you view a situation, you can express your values, but never ever try to convince somebody in the context of dialogue that you are right and they are wrong. Just leave it to their conscience. You share your views, you share your values, and then leave it to their conscience to decide, to make their own decision. That is also very more respectful for the agency of the other individual. And finally, it's not a conversion effort. Again, just like you cannot convince that you're right and they are wrong, you cannot change their religion. Again, they may be impacted, they may be influenced by the encounter, but this is a much deeper issue that should be left to the individual choice, and it should not be your goal in engaging dialogue. If your goal in engaging dialogue is to try to convert somebody, if this is your ulterior motive, it's going to be felt by the other person. Your presence there will be artificial, superficial, and the dialogue will not be genuine. You should pick another goal for dialogue, which could be social peace, which could be developing a friendship, which could be peace in the world, in your local community, making our lives better, avoiding conflicts. These are all worthy goals, which are also in line with our religious values. So if that's your goal and you represent your values, that should be sufficient for you. All right, so I hope that this is also helpful in understanding what dialogue is not. What can be done? There is so many options, so many things that can be done. This is a very short list of examples of activities for dialogue. Visiting each other's places of worship is very important to understand their beliefs, their practices, why they do, what they believe. This definitely develops empathy and mutual understanding. Family dinners and with Muslims or for Muslims, iftar dinners, that is very valuable. With a dinner or a breakfast together, you spend an hour or two, maybe three. It's a very intimate situation. You get to ask anything that you want, and you get to see a family in their original living setting. So that is very valuable opportunity for dialogue. Group dinners and iftars enable people to meet a person for the first time if they are not able to meet other people in their surroundings, in their neighborhood. So group dinners and iftars can lead to family dinners and iftars, family conversations. There are sometimes guided conversations. So instead of just freely talking about anything, there is a structure. People can be given forms. For instance, we will bring a topic. Everybody will speak to that topic from their perspective. And then nobody will ask a question or object. And then we will take a break. Then in the second portion, people will ask questions, make comments, so on and so forth. This is just one example of a structure for a conversation. There are so many models of conversations, structured conversations that are available online in the experience of dialogue experts. luncheons and breakfasts, book clubs or meetings, any hobby activity, basically. Book club is an example for a hobby. When you get to discuss a book, you can also discuss other things. You get to know people more deeply. Panels of experts or just commentators from a religious background or cultural background, workshops, seminars, symposia. One thing that is very valuable or found very valuable are trips. Now, of course, a trip is an expensive thing. Many people may not be able to afford trips, but you can also conduct smaller trips, for instance, from one city to another city, from one country to a neighboring country. So you can try to keep the costs low, because the trip gives you an opportunity to spend quality time with people, have a unique experience together, shared experience together. It gives you days, not just 1 hour or 2 hours, it gives you days. So that has a very meaningful impact. And in the trips that was organized by our partner organizations, we have always gotten this feedback. Actually, when I was living in Houston, this is kind of a funny anecdote. There was an organization which had the name Interfaith in it, but they were more focused on relief activities. So one day, the chairman of this organization wanted to have a conversation with me. He said that, Alp, for these years, we have been watching the activities of your organization. That was Interfaith, the Institute of Interfaith Dialogue in Houston. He said that we've been watching your organization and participating in some of the activities. Our board grilled me. They said, we have interfaith in our organization's name, but this organization is doing more interfaith work than we are doing. So we need to do something. He said that we started doing more interfaith work, but it was very hard to replicate the trips that you're organizing. They are so meaningful, so impactful. This is something that we found very hard to replicate. And in the trips that our partners, Institute of Interfaith Dialogue at the time, that we're organizing, we're not doing anything really special. The only thing additional we are doing in a trip is arranging family dinners, family meetings. Because anybody can see a touristic site. Anybody can see a temple or a mosque or a church or anything like that, or a natural place. Anybody can have a lunch at a restaurant. Any trip can have these things. But intimate conversation with a family, that is hard to replicate. So this was the aspect that affected the trip participants most. They had a free conversation with a family, with their children. They saw their home, how they live, what they believe in, what they value. So this is very important. Whenever possible, I am assuming that you are all, inshallah, God willing, will become activists in dialogue. So when you engage in dialogue, I highly recommend organizing trips. It doesn't have to be from India to another country. It can be within India or to a neighboring country, or a country that's not far, that's not too expensive to go to. And finally, social responsibility projects. And I saw that in Dialogue is involved in such projects, improving the quality of air, quality of water, quality of the residencies or food, improving any aspect of the life. These can be opportunities for dialogue. Now let's talk about civic engagement a little bit. Civic engagement is, as I said, it intersects with dialogue to a large extent, but there are some aspects that are kind of unique to civic engagement. So let's see some definitions of civic engagement by experts. Dr. Mary Hilton from Salisbury University in Maryland says, the process defines civic engagement as the process of connecting individuals in society with one another to share common interests and work for the common good. Connecting individuals in a society to share common interests and to work for the common good. American Psychological Association defines it as individual and collective actions designed to identify and address issues of public concern. So as you see in civic engagement, there is more focus on either solving a problem or improving the life of the society or improving the participants' lives, professionally or as a group. Charlene Ball from University of Pacific Stockton in California defines it as intentional intergroup interactions between community members and civic representatives to share perspectives, build common understanding, and identify and address issues of public concern. You see, this theme repeated among the definitions. Yet another definition is from Thomas Ehrlich, who is considered one of the real big experts in the area, in the civic engagement. He defines civic engagement as working to make a difference in the civic life of our communities and developing the combination of knowledge, skills, values, and motivation to make that difference. So civic engagement is not only about doing something, it is also developing capacity to do things, developing knowledge, organizational or individual knowledge, skills and values, developing capacity to make a difference, promoting the quality of life in community through both political and non-political processes. And this is very important. Sometimes you see civic engagement defined as almost like a political endeavor. It is not. Civic engagement can be both political and non-political. And I am assuming that with your educational background, by now you know that almost everything has a political dimension. But some things are more civic and social and cultural and less political, and some things are more political. So in that sense, civic engagement can be both political and non-political. It should not be reduced to either one of them. So the goals of dialogue and civic engagement, again, overlap. They are intended to prevent ignorance, stereotype, fear, prejudice, discrimination, anger, enmity, and violence. And they are intended to build familiarity, knowledge, empathy, acceptance, trust, harmony, and cooperation. So in a sense, we're trying to go from labels to humans. Right now in this group, we have, I assume based on the names, we have people who belong to various traditions within the Hindu broad tradition. We have Muslim participants. I am an American citizen of Turkish background ethnically. Many of you, I assume, are of Indian ethnic background. And some people would call some of us, darker skin, lighter skin, right? What are these? Indian, American, Turkish, Muslim, Hindu, black, white, what are these? These are actually just labels. What do they tell us about a human being? They are not about the true essence of a human being. The true essence of a human being is their soul, which is the human soul created by the same God. These labels, yes, they do tell us some things about our lives, about our background, but not that much. Because our character, how we live our lives, how we see others, that is the most important thing. And that is only revealed in action. It is not revealed through our labels. And I, among many people within the Hizmet movement that I'm a participant of, we are the best to know this by now, because now I'm an American citizen, but of ethnic Turkish background. I am a Sunni Muslim, just like the president of Turkey. But I cannot go back to Turkey right now. I am an ethnically Turkish Sunni Muslim, but I cannot go back to Turkey. Why? Because I publicly criticized Turkish president for their corruption and authoritarianism. So the fact that I am ethnically Turkish and Sunni Muslim doesn't make a difference. It doesn't improve my life. I cannot see my mother. I cannot see my family members, extended family members in Turkey. And they are afraid to speak to me. Why? Because for the Turkish regime, power is the most important religion, not Islam. So anybody who is unconditionally pledged allegiance to the president is more valuable and more free than Sunni Muslims or ethnic Turks. So, these labels, they mean something, but they don't mean much. How do we go from labels to human soul? That is the dialogue. Civic engagement and dialogue are the bridges from going from labels to the dialogue. So if I don't have a dialogue with you, if I don't have any engagement with you, I will look at the name Dr. Purvi Verma or Ajit Kumar. I'm going to say, oh, they are Indian, they are probably Hindu or something else. And they are just labels. But if I have a chance to sit with you, talk with you, learn about you, now you are a human soul in the body of a person who was born in India and belongs to a religion, but ultimately I'm seeing a soul. So this only happens when we have a conversation face-to-face, ideally. Zoom helps, but face-to-face is better. Then the souls recognize each other. So to illustrate this, I like a quote from Mevlana Jalaluddin Rumi. I'm sure you heard of him. Some of you might have heard of him. He's a Sufi poet who lived in what is now Turkey. He says that when two human beings, two persons come together and look at each other, it is two souls that are looking at each other through the window of the eye. When two human beings look at each other, it is two souls who are looking at each other through the window of the eye. If you think of a conversation in this manner, I bet that your feelings will change. Next time you look at somebody and talk with somebody, you will feel different. Think about this quote. All right, so that is the goal of this dialogue and civic engagement, to help recognize each other as fellow human souls, to feel that we actually first belong to the human family rather than our religion or ethnicity or country or whatever family. We first belong to the human family. You can also think of these goals as reversing what is called so-called pyramid of hate. In the pyramid of hate, it starts with biased attitudes, prejudice, acts of bias, goes to systematic discrimination, goes to bias-motivated violence, and then ultimately, sometimes it goes to genocide. So with dialogue and civic engagement, we want to reverse this pyramid. And we want to replace bias with familiarity. We want to replace prejudice with understanding and empathy. We want to replace discrimination with acceptance, equal treatment, compassion. We want to replace violence with trust and acceptance and collaboration. Now, in dialogue and civic engagement, there are sometimes fallacies and pitfalls. Let me also mention these. They are also important. Sometimes people are confused about the goals and the principles. So I mentioned some of the principles which are learned through experience, what dialogue is, what dialogue is not. When people try to do through dialogue or civic engagement what they are really not, what they are not designed to serve, then that fails. Seeing dialogue as a venue for proselytization, that fails. It's a pitfall. Seeing dialogue as a means for unification of religions or ideologies, seeing dialogue as a debate to win, coming to dialogue with an inner belief of superiority. I'm really better, my ideology or class or beliefs are better. Let me see what these other folks thinking. If you come to dialogue with this inner feeling of superiority, then it's not productive. Now, of course, you may believe that your religion is the best. There is nothing wrong with it, right? If you did not believe that religion is the best, you will not be in that religion. That's okay. But to believe that you are superior, that is the policy. Yes, your religion may be best, but to what degree you are living the values of your religion and the beliefs? To what degree you are a good representative of your religion, right? So believing that your religion is best is very different from believing you are better. We need to distinguish the two. Yes, my religion may be best, but in every human, there is something that I can learn. Aren't they created by the same God? If God wanted, he could make us all in one religion, right? But there is a diversity of religions in the world. So there is something that I can learn from everybody, from every human in this world, because every human is a display, is a mirror. This is Muslim belief. Every human is a display and mirror of the attributes and names of God. In Islam, there is this talk of 99 names, but Muslim scholars actually identified over 200 names of God and fewer number of attributes. But every human is a unique combination of these names displayed in this human being. Even if you do not believe in this way, I think you will agree that in every human, there is something that we can learn. We can learn from their humility, we can learn from their wisdom, from their consistency, integrity, we can learn from their sincerity, we can learn from their knowledge. We can learn something from them. Sometimes we can also learn from their mistakes, that we learn not to make the same mistake, right? So whenever there is an interaction, there's an opportunity for us to learn something from the other. There is an opportunity to improve ourselves. To come to the dialogue context with humility is so important. Okay, it is not one-way communication. There is a pitfall. We may also have subconscious biases and prejudices that we discover in the process of dialogue. Okay, so we need to be aware of those. Just having a subconscious bias doesn't mean we are a bad person. We are the children of our culture after all, right? We grew up in an environment. We grew up in a culture, in a history, in a family, in a neighborhood. We had experiences. We are taught things. We are shown things on the TV. So we are children of our times. So it is normal to have subconscious bias and prejudices. What is expected of us is to try to discover them. And if we see that they are not accurate, they are not serving us, to change them. That is what is expected of us, to be in continuous improvement. You might have heard this term, the Japanese term kaizen, right? Continuous improvement. Continuously discover our inner world, continuously discover our inner prejudices, biases, inner weaknesses, and then continuously try to improve them. That is what is expected of us. And finally, misreading of one's own religious tradition. And now I want to talk about it from a Muslim perspective, because many Muslims in the United States, outside, are very reluctant to engage in interfaith dialogue. Some of the reasons for this is, and you can apply this, you can transform this or project this to your own religious background. I'm sure in your religious background, there are people very reluctant to engage in dialogue, or very suspicious, or even sometimes see it as negative, as harmful. As far as Muslims, as far as I can observe, many Muslims lack a holistic view of the Prophet Muhammad والسلام. We usually see his life, read his life through the lens of events and actions. We do not have a good knowledge of his interactions beyond, let's say, battles or expeditions, trips, or the hijrah. These are the big topics in the Prophet's life: the first revelation, and then the oppression by Mecca, the hijrah, the migration to Medina, the battles that happened during the life in Medina with the Meccans, and so on and so forth. It's almost like an action movie. This is wrong. The Prophet's life, ﷺ, is not an action movie. It is a life full of interaction, full of human contact. What was he doing in his life? The biggest portion in his daily life, the biggest portion was spent in worship. So what was he praying? The understanding, what was the content of his prayers? Most people don't know this. What are the contents of the Prophet's prayers? They don't know this. And for how long hours he prayed? They don't know this. And then the next item in his life was family life. What he did in his family life as a family leader, as a father, as a husband. And then interactions with the community of Muslims, and then interactions with the community of non-Muslims. In Medina, where he spent a good portion of his life, 10 years, over 10 years, 13 years, there was a sizable Jewish community. Initially, there was a sizable polytheist community. In Mecca, of course, there was polytheist community. So what was his relations with them? Communications, relationship with the neighbors. So we don't know about this. We read his life as an action movie. So we miss his dialogues, his engagement in dialogue with almost everybody. If there's one lesson from reading the Prophet Muhammad's life, والسلام, with a larger lens, holistic lens, if there's one lesson, that is his life in society, among people, his life was a life of dialogue. And it was not only for spreading Islam. In every conversation, he was not saying, come to Islam, be saved. He was not saying this in every conversation. He was saying human relationships with people, both with Muslims and non-Muslims and mushriks, the polytheists and the Jews in his community. He was having human relations with them, transacting with them, visiting them. For instance, the Prophet was visiting what you would call today a synagogue / religious school of the Jews of Medina. He visited them multiple times. He visited Jewish homes multiple times in his life. And not all of these Jews did not become Muslim. The majority of them actually did not become Muslim. Only a small minority became Muslim. The vast majority of Jews remained Jews, but he continued his relationship with them until the end of his life. So what Muslims know is that the Jews initially in Medina, they made a pact with the Muslims to defend Medina. Then they betrayed Muslims, allied with the mushriks of Mecca, and they were punished. This is all we know about the relationship with Jews. So what happened to the Jews who did not betray the agreement? Because until the end of the life of the Prophet and after the end of his life, there were Jews in Medina who did not betray the agreement, who remained loyal to the agreement and remained as citizens and neighbors in Medina. What happened to them? What was the relationship with them? We don't know this, right? So if you don't understand the life of the people that we respect, then we may get the wrong lesson. Also, another reason for Muslims in abstaining from dialogue is that they read some of the verses in the Quran, and the verses of the Quran and the prophetic sayings, they clearly criticize or condemn certain beliefs and actions. There's no question about it. Certain beliefs and actions are condemned. Yes, that is true. But what was the relationship of the Prophet with the people who had those beliefs and actions? That is a different story. If we look at the Quranic verse, which is condemning, for instance, denying God or denying hereafter, or making partners with God, that is condemned in the Quran. And if you take this and then treat people with this lens only, that is not the prophetic tradition. Because the Prophet reached out to those people with compassion. He tried to reach out to them, to their human essence, and try to, if not, of course, he wished that they embrace Islam, but if that is not achieved, he aimed for social peace, social harmony. This was his aim too. His aim was not only spread Islam, but his aim was to achieve social peace. You can clearly see this in his relationships with the mushriks, the Meccan residents, and the Jews of Medina. You can clearly see this if you read the right biography. All right, anyway, so this is too much, I think, about the Muslim background, but I think you can apply this to the Hindu or other backgrounds. You will see people reluctant to engage in dialogue based on some notions. Sometimes they pick sayings from very, very long ago. They forget the historical context and try to apply it today. Okay, what kinds of civic engagement are there? Let's look at some categorizations. This categorization comes from the National Theatre for Children, a US-based organization. They have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 categories here: community service, civic learning, advocacy, capacity building, political involvement, and socially responsible behavior. They have 6 categories of civic engagement, and for each of them, they have examples. I believe that you will get a copy of the slides so you can look at the specific examples. In the interest of time, I don't want to go through the details. Another definition comes from youth.gov. This is a federal organization in the United States, which under its umbrella has many other federal organizations. And they define civic engagement as in 1, 2, 3, 4 categories. The basic definition is working to make a difference in the civic life of a community. In the subcategories, one category is civic action, participation in activities such as volunteering, service learning, and helping better the community. So this is, you can say this is the social responsibility aspect. Civic community or duty, willingness to make positive contributions to society. Civic skills, the ability to be involved in civil society, politics, and democracy. Social cohesion, a sense of reciprocity, trust, and bonding to others. So everything that is done within the civic engagement context are done in the 4 categories. Pew Research did a survey in 2009, and there might be a newer version of this. I did not check, unfortunately, but they asked what Americans are doing for civic engagement. And of course, the survey is based on the questions asked. So there are many things that they might be doing that are not asked in this survey. But just to get an idea of what Americans are doing, 32% of Americans signed a petition within the last year. 30% contacted a national, state, or local government official about an issue. 28% worked with a fellow citizen to solve a problem in their community. So if the first 2 are political civic engagement actions, the third one is, you can say, non-political. 24% attended a political meeting on a local town or school affair issue. Contributed money to a campaign or organization or a cause. This can be political or non-political. They was an active member of a group that tries to influence public policy or government, and then so on and so forth it goes. Another very helpful list is from Brookings Institution. They prepared this list, called it bucket list for active citizenship, because civic engagement is also sometimes called active citizenship. They give a list of 76 things that can be done, examples of activities under the broad category of active citizenship or civic engagement. And this list was generated with contributions from many, many organizations. Okay, in the first category, they have knowledge-based, or we mentioned capacity development, right? Knowledge development. This is that category. Stay informed, read papers, locally, regionally, nationally, question your news sources, learn about democracy, get the facts about politicians, candidates, talk with someone who doesn't share your political views. And there is an organization in America called Braver Angels who are organizing this. They bring together, in America, you probably know that there is a polarization between the conservatives and the liberals, the Democrats and the Republicans. There is a big, severe polarization these years, much worse than historical polarization. So Braver Angels actually try to bring, they bring together conservatives or Republicans and liberals, Democrats in an equal footing setting, equal numbers, equal status, and provide a safe environment and have conversations. Braver Angel, you can check it out on the web. Attend a discussion or event in your community or school. Shadow a public servant for a day, like be with them, follow what they're doing, help them, visit a museum or library, study your constitution. All right, and then it continues with political actions relating to voting. Vote, make sure you're registered to vote. Make a voting pact with your friends or family. Volunteer to register other people to vote. If you are a boss, give your employees time to vote. Volunteer at a working polling place, voting polling place. Offer to drive people to voting places. Prepare to vote. Send an absentee ballot. Participate, communicate with your elected officials, write opinion letters, attend a city council meeting, advocate for civic education in schools. Education is a very big part of civic advocacy, civic engagement. Join a campaign, become an ambassador supporting digital citizenship education. Join a parent-teacher association. This is non-political in a way, but political in a way. Get involved with this local school board, join a party, run for office. Build community. These are mostly non-political actions. Identify a problem in your community and work with your neighbors to fix it. Plant a tree. Visit someone else's place of worship. I mentioned this as an example of dialogue activity. Now you see it as an example of active citizenship. This is again supporting my initial statement that dialogue and civic engagement are, to a large extent, they are overlapping. Visit someone else's place of worship. Keep watch on children. Keep watch on neighbors' children, friends' children. Paint a mural, pick up trash, start a book club, serve as a juror, collect food, visit a nursing home or hospital, so on and so forth, together. Help others in emergency, contribute financially to a cause, volunteer for a pantry, soup kitchen, or food bank, volunteer to lead a youth group. You get the idea. I don't want to read all of them to you, but you can get this list. If you search, you'll get the copy of the slides. The bucket list for involved citizens, 76 things by Brookings Institution. Now, here's an interesting categorization of civic engagement by a scholar in America of Indian origin, Dr. Ashutosh Vaishnav from Brown University. He studied ethnic conflict in India and elsewhere, and he categorizes civic engagement into two: associational or institutional, you can say, and everyday or daily life engagement. Under the associational, there are engagement of people who come from different backgrounds in business associations, professional organizations, reading clubs, film clubs, sports clubs, NGOs, non-governmental organizations, trade unions, and even political parties. Under the everyday civic engagement, Families from different communities visit each other. They eat together regularly. They jointly participate in the festivals of each other. They allow their children to play together in the neighborhood, and they play sports together. And you can add additional activities to this. I can give an example from our neighborhood. One of our neighbors, he has a telescope. So sometimes he does a sky view, night. He sends messages to the neighbors. He says that I set up the telescope. We are watching Jupiter tonight, or we're watching Saturn tonight. If you want to come join us, you can join us. So, your imagination has no boundaries. You can organize anything in your neighborhood with a group to get together. And for professional associations that Dr. Washni mentions, there are plenty of them in every big city, in every small city even. So whatever your interest is or expertise is, or education or major or profession is, you can find many, many organizations in your neighborhood to engage in. In my part, I come from computer science, computer engineering background, so I was at once the secretary of the Dallas branch of Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers in America. I was also a member of the Association of Computing Machinery, and I was a member of other organizations as well, served in different roles in those organizations. In what ways can you get involved in professional or other associations? You can join as a member. You can attend the annual meetings or conferences. You can become an officer, in which case you get to spend much more time in that organization, meet more people, because you're going to be also attending the officer meetings, secretary, treasurer, director of something. You can become a committee member in that organization. You can attend committee meetings. You can volunteer in their activities and attend the volunteer meetings. You can organize events and you can attend events, and you can also be part of partnerships with other organizations. So these are different forms through which to engage in a professional or otherwise association, organization. Now, when you're looking for an association to engage with, what should you be looking for? You ask, does it facilitate networking? What is the membership size? Does it have a branch nearby? Does it have meetings of local members so that I can be in person, part of an in-person meeting? Does it have larger events that bring together members from around the nation or from around the region or state? How easy or difficult is it to become an officer or committee member in that organization? Are its activities meaningful to you? You will be much more motivated if the activities of the organizations are meaningful to you. Two examples from such organizations. One of them is Habitat for Humanity. You might have heard of its name. Habitat for Humanity, among other things, they build homes for people with no means or very little means. They organize volunteers, find donors to supply the materials, and they build homes, and they sell these homes to these people for a very small amount of money. For every month, let's say, $25, $10, whatever you can pay, they pay off these homes. Habitat organizes the volunteers and the supplies for building homes. One of their activities is interfaith build. So in addition to building homes, they actually bring together people of different religious backgrounds to build these homes. So this is kind of a sub-branch in home building activity, interfaith home build. Another very valuable organization in the United States is Family Promise. You might have heard or seen in the news that homelessness is a big problem in the United States. Some people, either for psychological reasons, for traumatic reasons, or for other reasons, are homeless. So there are organizations, municipalities trying to help these homeless people, providing shelters and food. For instance, there's a food bank organization that provides food. But an American woman of Christian religious background noticed that sometimes also families become homeless. It could be, mother, father, child, children. It could be a mother, child, a father, child. So although there are homeless shelters, these are not really good places for a family, for a woman and child, or, family and child, or family and children to be in. So what are they going to do? They cannot go to a shelter. What are they going to do? So she started this organization called Family Promise. She organized many, many organizations with a building to provide shelter, churches, mosques, or synagogues, or other temples, other organizations. They provide shelter for families. They also provide assistance for finding a job. and they provide food. So in New Jersey, the members of the Turkish American Cultural Center and the Peace Islands Institute, which is our partner in New Jersey, they partnered with this organization. They provided hot, warm meals. And they told us, this is also a little funny, but really, really good anecdote. They said that they heard from the family premise participants, they heard that the day when they provided this food was very much looked forward to, because they were the only ones who was providing warm, hot vegetable meals. Apparently, all the other meals were either not vegetable or not hot, cold meals or meat or some other kinds of meals, pasta. So everybody valued hot vegetable food. So their day when they provided food was very, very much cherished in the local community. So this is just an example of organization from the United States for civic engagement, where Muslims, Christians, Jews, and Hindus, and people of other backgrounds engage. All right, so far we talked about the definition of dialogue and civic engagement, what they are, what they are not. We saw examples of categories of dialogue and engagement. We saw examples of activities, but how do we know that these activities actually, these endeavors actually achieve what they intend to achieve? Do they actually succeed in reducing prejudice? Do they actually succeed in serving social peace in our community? So I want to share with you evidence from 3 domains. And with that, with this, I'm going to conclude my thoughts. The first comes from the domain of surveys. Sometimes they are called demographic studies. The second comes from social science, either social psychology or political science. And then the third comes from neuroscience. All right. So the first category is evidence from surveys. And I want to start this with a personal anecdote. I believe it was 2012 or 2013, 2014. I'm not sure at this moment. I met with this gentleman named Henry Izumizaki. He is an American of Japanese origin, and he was the director of One Nation Foundation. I'm not sure if you heard about it. I didn't hear about it until that time. One Nation Foundation is formed by businessman, entrepreneur George Russell, who is Christian, to improve the image of Islam in America. Okay, you didn't hear it wrong. This Christian white businessman formed an organization called One Nation Foundation to improve the image of Islam in America. Because he, in his words, he noticed that after 9/11, he saw that the attitude toward Muslims was very negative. And there was violence, vandalism, attacks against Muslims in America. And he thought, in his words, he thought that, in Europe, Christians among themselves fought for over 100 years. He said that we should not be fighting in America among Christians, Muslims, and other faiths. We should do something about this. So he formed this foundation to improve the image of Islam in the eyes of the Americans. And Henry Izumizaki was invited to serve as its director. So they started their activities in 2006. For 4 years, they worked. They did things like they educated the movie makers and news anchors. They educated the imams and the preachers in the mosques to better express things about Islam when they are interviewed by the media. They produced documentaries. There's a documentary about the life of Prophet Muhammad. You can watch a very high quality documentary that was aired by PBS. They prepared the documentary, The Sultan and the Saint. They helped prepare the documentary. So they did many activities like this. But in 2010, they saw a poll where Americans were asked to rank religions in terms of how warm they feel toward that religion and how cold or negative they feel toward that religion. And they were disillusioned. He said that, we were disillusioned because after 4 years of activity, we thought that our activities did not make a big difference in the perception of Islam in Americans. And I think he is being humble. I think their activities made a difference, but not big enough. So he said that in 2010, after seeing this poll, we changed our direction. From whatever we have been doing, we decided to do something else. What is that something else? They noticed in the same poll. Let me show you the poll first. So the Americans were asked, rank the religions in terms of how warm you are feeling toward that religion. So 100 being most warm, most friendly, most positive, and the 0 being most negative, most cold, right? Sometimes it's called the temperature survey. All right, so the Catholics, evangelical Christians, and Jews, they score the highest score, but they are very close to each other, 61, 62, 63. The atheists and Muslims score the lowest. And then in the middle, Buddhists, Hindus, and Mormons. Okay, but if you notice, it's not 90% to 10%. They are still close to each other, but there is a significant difference. And if you break down this by Republicans versus Democrats, the picture is a little bit different. Among the Democrats, among the Republicans, evangelical Christians have the higher score, 71, then Jews, then Catholics. Atheists and Muslims are at the bottom again. Among the Democrats, Jews are at the highest, 62%, Catholics 61. At the bottom are the Mormons, who are actually Christian. And then atheists, 46, Muslims, 47. Evangelical Christians score low among the Democrats, 53. They are at the highest for Republicans, but among the low among the Democrats. So there is the difference depending on whom you are looking at. So when they look at this, they thought that they did not make a difference. What made the difference? What made the difference was, do you know somebody from that group? If a person knew somebody from that group, their perception, their ranking was from 10 to 15% higher. For instance, for Muslims, if they did not know somebody from among the Muslim community, the ranking was 35. If they did know, it was 49. It is 14% higher. For atheists, 29 to 50. Mormons, 44 to 53. Hindus, 47 to 63. You see, in every religion, there is a positive difference if they knew somebody from that group. So they also saw this. So now Henry says that after they saw this, they changed the direction of the foundation. From whatever they were doing, they switched. They started supporting local organizations who bring people of different backgrounds together. They stopped everything they were doing before, and they used their remaining funds for supporting local organizations who bring people of different backgrounds together. Okay. So this is one example of survey showing that bringing people together in a positive context improves the relations, reduces the prejudice, and serves social peace. There is a very striking statement by Dr. Ingrid Mattson, who is the past president of ISNA, Islamic Society of North America. She was interviewed by Pennsylvania State University, and this is available on YouTube. You can search, I have the link in the slides. Dr. Mattson says that when Americans are asked, who do you want to have and do not want to have as your neighbor in terms of the religion, they say, I don't want to have a Muslim neighbor. But among Americans, the people with the most positive views of Muslims are people with Muslim neighbors. So this is saying the same thing in a different way, that when people look at another religion or group through the lens of the media or what they hear, then it is a negative, because media usually discusses the negatives, brings about the negatives about anybody, anything. But when they have a chance to meet with a person, as a human being, then their perception shifts positively, significantly. I had an anecdote about this. I might have erased it, but let me share it anyway. My organization, I am focused on relations with media organizations, think tanks, sometimes government agencies. So in this context, I once met with one of the producers of Good Morning America. This is a very popular show. You might have heard about it, Good Morning America, that airs in one of the main channels, national channels. And I asked him, I noticed that in the news programs, including yours, maybe, Good Morning America may not be a good example, but especially in the news, negative news are so much prevalent. The majority, even mass majority of the news are negative. Why is that? life is not like that in the lives of most people. Negativity is not the dominant factor. Maybe for some people in conflict zones, yes, but for vast majority of people, that's not the case. Otherwise, we would have many more, suicides around the world. So the news are not reflecting the reality accurately. Why do you have so many negative? Why do you have so few positive news? He said this. He said, negative news pay our bills. He used these exact words. If if my memory doesn't fail me, negative news pay our bills. So when any organization, news organization, they publish negative news, they get higher ratings. More people watch. So they are responding to human psychology, because human psychology is like this. The brain is always thinking, what happened in India, in Bangladesh, in South America, or in America, is Ukraine or whatever. What happened there? Could it happen here? If it happened here, what would I do? Somebody was attacked or robbed, or could it happen here to my home, to my family? If it were to happen, what would I do? This is how the brain works. So the brain pays attention to negativity to prepare, to make preparations. But unfortunately, this is not a good way to know what's going on in the world, because around the world, it is not just robbery and conflicts and killing that is going on. There is so much beauty, there is so much love and relationships, good relations going on, but they are not newsworthy. They don't make it to the news. What is expected doesn't make it to the news. So coming back to this survey, that before people meet with each other, they know, it's not knowing really, they think they know about each other through the lens of the news. But when they meet with each other, they are now human soul to human soul. All right, so that was the first category. Again, I'm giving you samples. As you can imagine, there are many more surveys that prove or that support the same position. Now, some evidence from the social science research, starting with Dr. Washni, who studied the ethnic conflict or religious conflict, we might say, or social political conflict in India. He noticed that in India, there are these conflicts. I'm sure you are much more familiar with them among Hindus and Muslims. People kill each other, people destroy each other's place of worship. Families are devastated sometimes. Thankfully, not very often, but when it happens, it is very severe and very sad. He noticed that the events are not causing the same, they're not at the same severity in every place, and they're not causing deaths, and they're not turning into violent conflict in every place. Particularly, he looked at the statistics for the deaths, and he noticed that after normalization, there's a big difference in the rate of deaths during these conflicts. So the numbers that you're seeing are normalized per 1 million population. These are the deaths that happen in the conflicts in India among Muslims and Hindus in different places, normalized for over 1 million population, per 1 million population. So they are not the total numbers, they are normalized. Otherwise, you cannot compare them. You know this by any basic mathematics course, statistics course. So look at the difference between what happened in Gujarat versus Bihar versus so on and so forth. When you come to the Tamil Nadu or Haryana or Punjab or Kerala, right? There is zero, almost zero, or very small, very close to zero deaths among 1 million population. Why is this? Why is there so less violence, almost no violence in some places, and there's so much violence in other places? So the conclusion that Dr. Washni reached after studying these communities is that there is much more civic engagement in the communities where there is so little violence, or when there is civic engagement, there is no or very little violence. Okay, and he talks about this in his book, Ethnic Conflict. You can get a copy of the book, but he actually talks about this on YouTube. You can watch his video on YouTube, this is dated about 8 to 10 years from today. So it is a little dated, but I think it is very still valid. He says that inter-ethnic religious networks of civic engagement are agents of peace, both associational and everyday forms of civic engagement. Remember the categorization, associational and everyday civic engagement. Both of these, if robust, if they are consistent, if they're ongoing, promote peace. Contrariwise, their absence, when there is no engagement, if they are weak or absent, it opens up the space for ethnic violence. And another very important observation, associational forms of engagement are more resistant to efforts to polarize people. So this is saying something very important. This is saying that these conflicts sometimes do not happen out of nowhere. They have historical backgrounds, they have local backgrounds, but some people also try to polarize people, and they benefit from it. Politicians or otherwise, other people, they benefit from it. So he's saying that associational forms of engagement, these forms of engagement, they are more resilient to efforts to polarize people. So if you want to have the social peace in a more stable way, then we should emphasize associational engagement. That doesn't mean we should ignore everyday engagement, because this is a crucial part of the engagement. But what he's saying is that in the case of the conflicts, the everyday engagements are more likely to break down. They break down more easily as opposed to long-term associational engagements. So that is the lesson, which is also seen on other places like Yugoslavia and so on and so forth. People saw that the everyday engagements may be broken more easily than associational engagements. All right, so there is an interesting article in this area, which is not an academic article, but I highly recommend that you take a look at it. It's entitled "Your Racist Brain: The Neuroscience of Conditional Racism." And this article, although it's not an academic article, it does have some academic references, and it summarizes the process of how the bias prejudice happens, how it turns into violence, how it is conditioned socially, and how it can be reduced or eliminated. It is a very good summary of this process. So I find it very valuable. So the article says that, number one, our brains are constantly gauging people, whether they are friends or foes. Anyone perceived different from friends or what we see as in-group triggers a threat response, putting our nervous system into fight or flight mode. We have less empathy for others versus us. So for people whom we perceive as in-group, we have more empathy for them. For people who we perceive as out-group, we have less empathy for them. Our brains are predisposed to fear those who are different. So this is something that is actually to see people who are different from us as potentially a threat is an inborn trait, which is probably helpful for little children. For little children, if they see somebody different, they should be suspicious and they should be cautious. They should stick with their family. For little children, it is helpful. But when we grow up, when we get into the society, we should be able to grow out of this tendency, because it's not serving us anymore. But there is something biological. They have seen through experimentation, through observation, that there is something biological about seeing people different as potentially dangerous. This is coming, it has a biological root, but this biological root can be overcome, it can be reduced. Some fear conditioning is learned through personal experience, but a lot of it is turned through social learning, which means in your family, in your community, through the news, through the media. Now, these are the bad news. The bias has biological roots, and then social learning, family learning, cultural learning sometimes makes it worse. But rewiring the brain is possible. So in other words, whatever we learned, it has a footprint in our brain, but it can be changed because brain has plasticity, it can be changed. To change the brain, we need to reframe our perception. We need to reframe the other groups, what we perceive as the other. We need to reframe it. We need to see them as members of a bigger family. We need to see them as potential friends. We need to see them as sharing common goals and common concerns. And this only happens through dialogue. And the final point is most valuable for us. Personal interaction with people from other groups can be a powerful rewiring experience. So through personal interaction in a positive setting, fulfilling certain conditions, the brain is actually rewired and the perception is changed. The prejudices are eliminated. So this article actually mentions this in a very flowing way, in a very easy to understand way. So I recommend highly to read this article, not an academic article, easy to read, but it's not academic. So let me share with some scientific academic evidence with you. So one from an article that is mentioned in this article by Olsen and Ebert, they say that our results indicate that individuals from a racial group other than our own are more readily associated with an aversive stimulus, with a negative stimulus. But this prepared fear response might be reduced by close positive interracial contact. Okay? And they list their evidence based on social science research, and this is the reference for that article. This is mentioned in the original article that I mentioned here, in the Manny Bosman article. One of the references is this article. Another one, a very important meta-analytic study. You might have heard the meta-study term. This is a study that analyzes other studies. It looks at the results of many other studies and tries to reach a conclusion based on many studies. So this particular study by Dr. Pettigrew from University of California, Santa Cruz, and Linda Trapp from Boston College, they say that with 713 independent samples from 515 studies. So they looked at 515 social science studies. The meta-analysis finds that intergroup contact typically reduces intergroup prejudice. Okay, this may be not clear to you at this moment, but it's so important. They are saying that 515 studies that they looked at, when you look at these studies collectively, they show that intergroup contact, when it fulfills certain conditions, intergroup contact typically reduces intergroup prejudice. Reducing prejudice means potentially reducing violence, conflicts between these groups. So very important article, a meta study, and I have the link for this. It is available online. You can download, and the link is here. With 713 independent samples from 515 studies, the meta-analysis finds that intergroup contact typically reduces intergroup prejudice. And there's a book published by the same authors, When Groups Meet. It turns out that there's a whole branch of social science study called intergroup contact theory. So intergroup contact theory actually studies how the interaction of groups affect their prejudices, their conflicts, how they relate to each other. This is in the context of whites and blacks in America and other people in Europe, etc. It's not just limited to America, but it started in America between the whites and blacks. Now, what are the conditions for these intergroup contact experiences to be productive? Dr. Gordon Allport from Harvard University, I believe, initially listed these conditions, and then the researchers say that his initial conditions stood the test of the time. So although this is dated 1954, in the 2000s, through social science research, they are still finding that these conditions hold. For intergroup contact to be successful, it has to fulfill these conditions. Condition number one, people from the different groups have to be on an equal status, equal footing. They should be pursuing common goals. They should agree on their goals. We want to make India a more peaceful society. We want to make India a more livable society. Or we want to make, Gujarat or New Delhi a more livable society, livable place. They have to agree on the goals. They have to. There has to be opportunities for cooperative action, cooperative interaction. It should be in a way to allow for the development of close relationships. In other words, there should be the potential. It may not develop, but there should be the potential to develop a friendship. And finally, this contact should have the support of the institutional authorities. It can be the government, it can be the culture, it can be religious or civic organizations. So when these 5 conditions are met, the intergroup contact serves social peace, as shown by these meta studies. And finally, the third category of evidence comes from neuroscience. I'm not an expert in this area. I'm just going to give you a few samples, and then I'll let you explore the area with some of the references here. There are more studies in neuroscience that actually show the neurological basis of prejudice than the ones that show the improvement, because the improvement is relatively new. The elimination of the prejudice through contact, the study of this in neuroscience is relatively new. But we have many more studies that is showing how the prejudice, the threat response, how it shows up in the brain. There are more studies about that. So this one, insights from fMRI studies into in-group bias. And they show how the brain acts differently in an fMRI, magnetic resonance imaging, functional magnetic resonance imaging, shows how people respond to people whom they see from in-group versus out-group. You can see the difference in their brains, how they respond to the people from in-group versus out-group. Now, in terms of the positive effect of the intergroup contact, this one study by Houston and Spiegler, they say that our findings suggest that positive contact and individuating experience, in other words, seeing, for instance, on my screen here, Zishana, right? So seeing Zishana not only as a member of a group, but as Zishana. Seeing Dr. Purvi not as a member of a group, or she's an academic, or she is a Hindu, or she is something, right? Not as a member of a group, but as Dr. Purvi, as Purvi. Seeing Ajit as Ajit, right? So that, when they say individual experience, that's what they mean. Our findings suggest that positive contact and individuating experience directly modulate processing of out-group phases, individual cortex, and illustrate that contact quality, rather than merely familiarity, is important factor in reducing the own race phase effect. So people have a positive bias toward their own race and negative bias toward the other race, right? So the contact and the individuating experience reduces the prejudice toward the other race. And this can be seen in brain imaging results. Another study by Farmer and friends or colleagues, positive intergroup contact modulates, and there is this name, fusiform gyrus, this is part of the brain, activity to black and white faces. And they have a similar result. The third one is this one, the neuroscience of intergroup threat and violence by Lantos and Molenbergs. And here, this is also very valuable. They again study the reflections in the brain of in-group, out-group perceptions. And they say that with a proper intervention, this can be changed. The process of going from prejudice to violence can be changed with a proper intervention. What is an intervention? In this graphic, it's hard to read, but intergroup contact is listed as an intervention. So they can show that, they can see that with the proper intervention, intergroup contact, the chain from prejudice to violence can be interrupted. So these were just 3 samples from studies from neuroscience showing that, again, when properly conceived, when properly organized, designed, intergroup contact helps serve social peace. Civic engagement, dialogue serves social peace, reduces prejudice. Now, of course, there is a reminder here that we should not be naive. There are people, there are factors and circumstances that feed fear, that feed prejudice, stereotyping, polarization, and conflicts. We cannot be ignorant toward these conditions. And I'm thankful to one of the participants in this program who pointed this out. There are, for instance, very severe economic injustices in the society. So we cannot be a Pollyanna and just hope that through dialogue we're going to solve these differences and animosities. No, you have to address the injustices in the economic domain, in the political domain, in other domains. You have to do that. So, and there are also people who benefit from these injustices, who benefit from polarization, hate mongers, right? So we cannot be ignorant of these realities. So we should address them separately. What we are saying in this presentation is that regardless of what's going on in the rest of the society, regardless of whether you are doing something or not about these other dimensions, dialogue and civic engagement, by building empathy, by building mutual understanding helps solve these problems. It is not the only solution. It's not the most important thing, maybe, but it helps solve these problems by building empathy. Because to address an injustice, people first need to understand each other's situation, right? If a wealthy person is not experiencing what poor people feel, that he's not going to be part of the solution. So how can a person feel what another person is feeling? Through interaction, through dialogue. How can we facilitate dialogue so that a richer person, more wealthy person can meet with a poorer person? Or a person from the majority can meet with a person from minority. A person from a historically dominant group can meet with a person from a historically minority group. Or a person from a group who persecuted or oppressed another group meet with a person from the oppressed group. They don't have to be from the same duo. It can be just from a dominating from a dominated group. So in other words, the other dimensions of the conflict and the prejudice have to be addressed. We cannot be ignorant about it. We cannot be naive about it. We also cannot be naive about people benefiting from the polarization. We have to do something about those. But regardless of what we do in those domains, civic engagement and dialogue helps build empathy and helps address those other dimensions as well. And I'm going to finish with this slide. What is expected of you as participants in this process? Be an ambassador, be a locomotive of dialogue, civic engagement, active citizenship. Reach out to people, reach out to everybody. Everybody can do something, everybody should do something in their domain, with their neighbors, with their co-professionalists, with their school parents. Everybody can do something, and recruit people, interested people, available people in this domain through different activities. Hold their hands and enable them to do something very small, very simple, that they're not going to fear or they're not going to abstain from. So that is expected of you. And that is the end of my presentation. I thank you for your time, and I'm open for your questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Aslandogan, for this very enriching, I would say, and very insightful session. I mean, I have a lot of takebacks, and now the platform is open. So anyone, you please feel free to ask questions, raise your hands, and please try to introduce yourself briefly, your name and what you do, and you can follow with your question. Since we are, a part of our dialogue, we are talking about dialogue. So let's begin here first. So quickly, please, everybody raise your hands and ask for questions. Or if in case if you don't have any query, if you have any comments regarding, the whole session, how do you feel? What is the new thing which you have learned, or any, one take back you can share quickly? It would be amazing. And please briefly share about yourself, introduce yourself.
I think Jai first raised his hand.
Good morning, sir. Yeah. So I'm currently pursuing my second year in masters from Jamia Millia Islamia, and it's in conflict analysis and peace building. So that's a brief introduction about me. And I had two questions for you actually. So basically, in our course also we studied basically conflict transformation and conflict resolution, and dialogue has been an important part of it. So my question to you is that in this session we learned a lot about dialogue, basically bringing understanding between communities. So how do you basically apply techniques like dialogue and these activities that you have mentioned in the context of hostile communities, basically in the context of reconciliation? That is my first question to you. And my second question to you is that and how has your American citizenship affected your view towards sort of dialogue and identity, where America, as we all know, is a melting pot sort of culture, where where it's basically it's inbuilt in its foundation that initiatives like these are successful. But say, for example, Europe, where it's a salad bowl sort of situation, where you basically have to give up parts of your identity to assimilate, essentially, which is not exactly a requirement in America, where you are grandfathered in by second generation. So how does that affect your sort of view on these relations? Because I also observed that even during our session, a lot of your examples were from the context of America. So these are my two questions to you.
Yes, very, very good questions. For the first one, excellent question. It is easier to facilitate dialogue among people who are not hostile to each other. So the examples of dialogue and civic engagement that I give, in the best case, they are already people who are open to dialogue, who want to know about the other person, the other group. In the worst case in America, at least in my experience, it's among people who may hold prejudices, who may hold negative views, but nevertheless, they can be convinced to engage in a dialogue or civic engagement project. So they do not have outright hostility toward other people. So those are easier kinds of dialogue. They are still valuable because everybody has prejudices. Everybody has certain misperceptions or fears, whether they say it or not. Right. So if they are hidden, at some point they have the potential to turn into more aggressive actions and conflict. So on the one hand, it's easier, but it is not valueless. It is still valuable. In a sense, you can see that as a prevention toward future hostilities. Another benefit is this, that the people who are willing to engage in dialogue and civic engagement, they are sometimes friends with people who are not, who are hostile. So through those people, you're able to reach to a larger group. Engaging with people who are easier to engage, that is not valueless, that is still valuable. Of course, we need to reach beyond, we need to go beyond. And the worst example that I faced in America, I know it's going to sound very mild to you, but this was by our friend in Dallas, Texas. He visited a church and knocked on their door and met with the pastor. He said that as a Muslim organization, they are organizing dialogue activities. What the pastor said was, if you're not a Christian, you're destined for hell, and I don't need to speak with you. This is the worst hostility that we faced. So it is still very mild compared to people beating each other or cursing each other, verbally being aggressive, and worse forms of violence. I know. This is still very valuable, but we need to go beyond, and we need to also go into the domain of hostility. Now, of course, there is a special domain that requires expertise and specialization, and you're studying it. You probably know more about it. But I know in the domain of hostility is that it is not very productive to try to reach out to people at the height of the hostility. At the height of the hostility, they are basically dominated by their emotions. Their prefrontal cortex, which makes us human, is in the background. Their emotions, their protective side of the brain, the inner brain, is active. So trying to reconcile, trying to reason with them, trying to show our common goals and so on and so forth, that doesn't work. So one thing that can be done is just to wait for the hostility to recede to some degree, and then try. And unfortunately, as we know, many of the hostilities are not one-time hostilities. Many of the hostilities are like cyclical. They come and go, they come and go. So the best time to address this among these groups that are hostile to each other is when the hostility is not at its peak, when it is lower. So that is one thing that I know from the domain. Number two thing that can be done is if people are open to some kind of conversation, some kind of engagement, to have a trusted third party. They may not trust each other. They may be hostile to each other, but there may be a third party that they trust. They are willing to come under the umbrella of that third party. Can be an organization, can be a person. Even if it is an organization, usually it takes a person to earn the trust. That is the second thing that I learned. And the third thing that I know from that domain is to try to focus people's attention into future, not the past. Because the past is full of blood, full of aggression, full of violence. As long as we focus on the past, we cannot resolve this. So we need to focus on the future. Yes, this happened. This happened to you, your family, your community. It happened. We cannot reverse time. At least we haven't found a way to do that yet. but there is something we can do about the future. If we are able to do this, to shift the attention to future, people need to be heard. So we need to make sure that they feel heard. Okay, this happened to me, to my family. Let me share another anecdote with you. I met with a Palestinian student when I was a student. And at that time, the suicide bombings were prevalent in Palestine, Israel. And in our conversation, I said to him, his name was Sami, I believe. I said, Sami, suicide bombing is against Islamic values. You cannot kill innocent people. Children die, women die, people who are not fighting die in a suicide bombing. That is wrong. He said, well, if your home was destroyed, if your family members were killed in a raid or in a bombing, you could do something like that. That was his response. And I said that it's possible for any human being to lose their temper, to lose their mind, and go into that mood, but it doesn't make it right. It doesn't justify it. A human being, being a human being, may go into that mood and lose his reasoning and go into something wrong, but that doesn't make it right. We need to make the distinction. Two wrongs don't make a right. It's very important to shift. So what I said is that the best time to try to resolve a conflict between, let's say, Israelis and Palestinians is not when there is a raid or when there is an attack. It is maybe 1 year, 2 years, 3 years after that period. And of course, there are like we mentioned in our reminder, there are injustices, there are wrongs that have been done in the past. They need to be addressed. We cannot resolve this only through conflict resolution methods like dialogue and civic engagement. Those are the three things that I know, but I'm sure there are many others, but that is an area that definitely requires expertise. I would not start there, civic engagement and dialogue. I would start in an easier domain. I will start with people who are willing to engage. So among the hostile community, are there people who are willing to engage? Start with those and try to spread. That's what I would share. Now, for your second question, and I'm sorry for my long answer, I'll try to be quicker for my other answers. Yes, United States is, in United States, we are very lucky that everybody came from somewhere to the United States. Even native, what we call Indians or Native Americans, they came from Asia, according to historical research. So everybody has ancestry in somewhere else. You go back enough generations, you go to some other continent. In Europe, it is more difficult. That is true. Many of the states in Europe are nation states. You may have to give up more. But in Europe too, just like in the United States, there is a movement. There is it may not be called a movement, but there is a group of citizens who believe in equal citizenship, who believe in integration, and some degree of multiculturalism. Not all of them, maybe not majority, but there is a group of citizens and people in Europe, in every country, who believe that people who came to this country later, they have a right to retain some part of their culture. In America, this is very clear. There was a survey done by Pew Research or some other organizations, I don't remember right now. They asked Americans, how do you view people maintaining an element of their background culture? And 73% of Americans said that maintaining some aspect of your culture in America is part of being American. So in America, it's very easy. But in Europe, it is not hopeless. In Europe, there are significant minorities, or in some countries, a majority, not a big majority, but slight majority, who believe in multiculturalism, or at least maintaining some elements of your culture. And regardless of whether you maintain culture or not, being treated with dignity, being treated with equality. So there should be no prejudice against you because of your cultural background. There are people who believe in this. And if you look at the European Union documents and United Nations documents, you will see this. So we simply need to ally with those people in Europe and elsewhere and act with them. If we act alone as immigrants, second generation immigrants or first generation immigrants, it's not going to succeed. But if we act with people who believe in the same concept of allowing for cultural variation, diversity, then it is more likely to succeed. Ranvir, I'm sorry for the long answer.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. It's such a wonderful to just listen you from past 1.5 hours. It was a really good experience. My question is in the regard of one of the bestseller book about Why Nation Fails by Robinson and Agmulu, I think. So they mention in that book that about a vicious and virtuous cycle, where they are mentioning about that any country having inclusive political and economic institutions and a free media are tend to go for a vicious cycle. Now, in context to India, while realizing that we are also compromised inclusive economic and political institution, and media is also in a very bad shape here. Now, I'm considering that this Maslow's hierarchy of need, so majority of the population, they are still at the bottom of this pyramid, and the people who are able to secure certain assets, certain class for themselves, they are creating a parallel world for themselves where they are getting meeting every days and for themselves, and they are just creating a barbed wire among themselves, and they are considering themselves as unapproachable. Now, this population group is also the one which can easily get persuaded with the fake news also. So how you see that this population who are top of the society, and but still are unable to reach, unable to approach, and how a dialogue and this civic engagement can be seen in their context particularly. This is just one simple question.
Yeah. Again, very good question. There are people, if I understood you right, there are people who are wealthy, and they have everything that they need, and they have more than they need, and they live in a kind of a bubble, and they can also be misled by the fake news. So in my experience, it is possible to reach out to everybody with different amounts of difficulty. Just let me give you an example from Houston, where I lived before. In South America, in many places, people who have guns, who hunt, are most likely to view Muslims as dangerous. So in there, a Muslim in Houston, I was part of a group with this person. He joined a hunting group. He was a hunter before, I don't know, or maybe he bought a hunting gun. And once he began to go hunting with these people, white Americans, mostly Christian, they begin to say, Muslims in general are bad, but you are good. So that group is relatively difficult to enter and have a conversation with, but it was possible. And I gave the example of this gentleman, white Christian American businessman, who started the One Nation Foundation. So, in one way of looking at him, he is one of the elite class, right? He has many millions, maybe billions of dollars. He is able to spend millions on a cause like this out of his pocket, right? So normally you would not think of reaching out to him, but he himself started this project. I think, if you consider people as people, individuals, not as a group, then you have chances to reach out to them. It is just more difficult. They go to a golf club that you cannot be a member of. You have to pay thousands of dollars. They go to a country club that costs thousands of dollars. So it's very hard to reach to them. But there are among them, who are reachable. It only takes the first contact, and then developing some kind of empathy with them. There are of course who do things knowingly, consciously. They are vicious consciously. They are indifferent consciously. Of course, we should not waste time with them, but I don't believe they are the majority, even among those groups. I would seek out individuals. If you don't know an elite from this class, maybe you know somebody from an in-between class. So through his person, it's possible to reach. sometimes it's possible to join organizations to meet individuals. I know what you're talking about. It is an issue. So my kind of suggestion or recommendation is to always be cognizant of the group reality, but treat individuals as individuals and reach out to them individually. And we have seen examples of individuals changing the group dynamics in their groups. When we reach out to one individual, that individual in their group changing the dynamics, maybe aligning with a few others in their group, changing dynamics. So waking people up to our interconnected nature. This is something that we need to do.
No,
but excellent question.
Yeah, just one
don't
small
have the silver bullet for
if
that.
you allow me. This question was formed in the sense that if you see in India, even in various urban places, there will be all the kind of public avenues which facilitate some kind of social gatherings. They are vacant, or by the most there will be some elderly people who will be coming for morning walk, evening walk in those parks. But all the active member of societies, they will be engaged in their own houses, will not be going out to becoming more social, and so they are not reachable in that sense also.
Yeah. This definitely takes effort. And one example that I gave, I believe last year, was an example from again from Houston. I lived in Houston for 6 years. In America, there are different Christian groups. You probably know about that. The evangelicals are the ones who are most close to dialogue, and who are the ones who are most likely to see others, Muslims and others, as dangerous or negatively. So what happened there was, in the cultural center, there was a course, interfaith course, organized by Hartford Seminary with participants from different religions. And this leg of the course is held in Houston, and they visit people's places of worship. So our friends in Houston, the directors of the cultural center, took this group to, for instance, a temple, a Hindu temple, different Christian denomination churches, synagogue, and there's a mosque in the cultural center as well. One of the churches they visited was an evangelical church, a big church, thousands of members, financial means and everything. They have media production, they are like a media company, very professional, organized, everything. So they took this group multiple times to this church, and they said, what is your understanding of Christianity? How does your denomination or your version of Christianity differ from others? Please tell us. So they told very happily. They shared their view, how you can be saved, etc. And this happened once, twice, and third time. And after the third time, the group, we learned this afterwards. The group internally discussed. They said, this Muslim group is bringing us this group, interfaith group, every time. They are asking us questions, learning about Christian, not telling us anything, not proselytizing. But we have never visited their mosque. We should. And they come and visit the mosque. So sometimes it's going to be an proactive effort. So I divide the the audiences in this area into two: the usual suspects and those who are difficult to reach. There's probably a mid segment as well. So it's easy to go with the usual suspects. What you're referring to are people who are more difficult to reach, people who are not naturally doing it. We, as people who are conscious of this, we need to be proactive. Always search for means to reach out to people. The example that I gave from our neighborhood, or the sky view, night view, planet viewing experience is one example. Who would have thought? It brings together all the neighbors from different backgrounds, and it's not for religion, it's not for anything. Just but conversation happens there. We get to know each other better.
Thank you very much.
I think Dr. Purvi is next, if I'm not mistaken.
Hi, thank you. First of all, Dr. Aslandogan, a beautiful presentation, and very good evening to everybody. I don't have any question per se. I have comments to make. So totally relatable to whatever you said. So a bit introduction. I am a doctor. I used to practice in medical fraternity for quite some time. Then I switched to becoming a academic. I was studying public health, and then now I'm in active politics. So all these fields, I have seen that dialogue has helped me tremendously in having conversations with people. And here I'd like to just tell, and also to Ranveer sir, your question I understood, and I'd like to tell you what we do in all these three fields. What I've done is, as a doctor, I think you're not really looking at inter-religious dialogue or interfaith religious, but you're also looking at making the patient comfortable. So history taking was a main part where we would listen to people and, engaging in dialogue. Listening to them is more important than giving them opinions or options. So that is one more important part of, open dialogue.
Absolutely.
Then
listen first.
When I became right. Yes. And then, find out remedies and be a part of their story. They have a lot of traumas. So what usually happens is, because we have doctors here as well, I understand we're in rush. We don't listen to them. We start prescribing certain medications and tell them what to do, what not. I've seen majorly when you listen to them, 60% of their problems disappear. All they want is somebody to listen to them. So that's important. And then even in public health field, where you have medicine and people, community coming together, we used to have camps where we would go, as you must be aware, in public health CSMCH, we would go to camps and we would talk to people. We would listen to their problems, and then we would try to provide the humane solutions, vis-a-vis community perspective or political perspective, whatever was possible. And especially in my active political era, I realized, so what we do is we go to villages, we hold special meetings with women and children. I try to teach them about, mental health, health hygiene, menstrual health, and reproductive and sexual health as well. And even with men, I tried talking with them because it's a very patriarchal society. Initially, they will not listen to you. They'll try, they'll heckle you, they'll fight. But with constant dialogue, it's very important that you maintain a rapport with them. You keep going. Repetition is very important in certain meetings. So like you said, we've held iftar meetings with iftaris. We've gone to iftaris. So in India, we also have, as coming from a Hindu religious background, not a practicing one, but also we do holy parties. So because we have a political arena around us, we invite a lot of people from different faith to our place. We go to their place. So there's an intermingling of, a lot of people from different sections. Where we're talking about gender, we're talking about different castes and classes. And I come from an area, I do politics from an area which is extremely rural area. So we have a lot of Dalits, we have a lot of minorities, both in terms of Muslims and Sikhs. And, even I belong to an OBC class called other backward classes. So when you're engaging with people from the Savarnas or upper groups as well, you need to have a very stronger dialogic, have to have a theme. So that is my comment, that very relatable content. And because I was reading the articles which were sent to us, even the role of brain, our amygdala, how it gets activated, how our dorsal anterior cingulate cortex get activated when we feel pain. I have seen it firsthand. So even to Ranveer sir, I would tell that, you were saying that initially, especially in urban settings, people don't engage. I'd like to differ here by saying that I've been a part of very many groups. I'll tell you, funnily, there are groups called Wine and Paint. So you go have wine with people and paint, and you talk about your whatever you're feeling. So mostly these are all women groups, but also there are like dine and chat groups, book clubs. Delhi has a lot of parks. So there are open book clubs, then there are movie clubs. There are also comic clubs where people who find humor important element like me, they all come together and then you share jokes. So there are urban settings, you can do these. In rural settings, of course, you'll have to go and commit yourself to, meeting people and making that connection on a regular basis. Because once you'll go, if you don't go again, they really don't like it. You have to go there again and again. So yes, civic engagement is a form where you actually approach out and you have to have a theme for a dialogue. You can't go to a place and say, I want to do this. They will not accept you. You have to have something which is common with their theme. So even when I go to villages and tell young girls that I'm here to talk about menstrual health, they are very shy. They don't come forward. They cannot say the word period out loud. They're very shy. They don't want to talk about period poverty. So you have to make your content relatable to them. I think that's one of the keys of having a conversation or a dialogue. So
absolutely.
Yeah, that is.
So what you talked about, that I name the wisdom in dialogue and civic engagement. We have to be wise about what we are doing. And if you have not done so, if InDialog has not done so, I highly recommend to develop a kind of a guidebook in organizing such activities. We have to be wise about them. We cannot be naive about them, because there are so many fallacies and pitfalls. We can fall into one of those pitfalls. Being smart about dialogue is so important. Otherwise, it's not going to be productive. Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, we have Mr. Solomon.
Yeah.
He's up.
I am Solomon, a Catholic Jesuit priest. Okay, I've been working among the tribals for the last 25, 30 years. And at present, I am really doing sort of a dialogue ministry in the northeastern part of the Jharkhand, among the tribals. Now, thanks for a very good session. It is indeed elevating. And you have articulated quite a bit of what went on, what goes on within our hearts and minds, especially when we go and talk to the people. Now, mostly I've been working in the rural areas. I think the rural areas have got its own dynamics. So one has to be really attuned to the dynamics that is taking place. Now, do you see any difference between the dialogue within the urban area and the rural area? Number one. Number two, most often, and of course, we talk of dialogue in terms of intergroup dialogue, interfaith dialogue, from one group to the other. It's very easy to identify. I think we also need dialogue, intra-group dialogues. Can you sort of put an enlighten on that? In the sense, maybe we are united on a common denominator, but there are traditions within the groups. Okay, we have got a lot of denominations within the Christian community. For example, you pointed out evangelical groups, there are Protestant groups, mainline churches, smaller groups which are coming about. Okay, so we have initiated quite a bit in this, but we find that within about 90% of the group actually responds very, very, very slow. So are there elements for intra-group dialogue itself? Is there a possibility? I think these two, maybe we can think about it, reflect about it. I think our own experience also. If not now, maybe at a later stage, we can dialogue with, we can interact with one another if the time doesn't allow today.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Again, very, very keen observations and good questions. The difference between urban dialogue and rural dialogue, clearly, I mean, you probably know more about this than I do. My experience in rural is either based on my background in Turkey or in my travels in America to rural areas. There is definitely a big difference. The way that you approach dialogue, the theme of the dialogue is different. I think more importantly, if you're going to say something that is a principle, that the dialogue should be focused on, it should always be contextualized. In this context, what should our dialogue be focused on? Of course, dialogue ultimately aims at having us realize each other as human beings, as human souls. That is the ultimate goal of dialogue. But what is a particular context? So in my experience back in Turkey, a village who come from a particular background hates the other village, neighboring village. They had disputes in land, they had disputes in people attacking each other. One village is on the way to the other village. When people are traveling through that village, they get harmed and so on and so forth. So that is the context. We aim at dialogue and understanding each other and seeing each other as human souls. But the context is dispute about the land, dispute about people, violence, dispute about marriages or whatever. So we cannot ignore the context. So that is the, you might say, socio-political context or historical context of the dialogue. And then there is the beliefs of the people, the way people naturally interact with each other or not interact with each other. their cultures and customs. So dialogue cannot be isolated from these contexts. So when we say the wisdom about dialogue, being wise about, being smart about dialogue, we mean understanding these contexts. We cannot inject dialogue into a rural situation and hope that peace will come as the fruit. We have to be really wise about that. So first of all, we need to identify what problems we are facing, what problems we are trying to address first, through humanizing each other, through realizing the humanity in each other, what problems we are trying to face, and in what context we are situated. If we are naive about this, of course, it's not going to bear fruit. So there are definitely differences between rural and urban. Within urban areas, there are differences. So that is why, as people who believe in dialogue, who are active in dialogue, we need to develop our recognition of the context, historical, social, cultural, all the context as much as possible to design anything. Again, our time, as you said, is not sufficient to go into details, but I hope that in dialogue can focus on this and maybe develop different approaches for different contexts. I am aware of a study in an activity in UK, for instance, the story of a chickpea. They recently received an award from BBC. I encourage you to study it. So they developed an approach that worked in the British context, and it was recognized as helping. So just like they say, the problems sometimes are general, but they are always local. Even a general problem is local. The solutions can be general, but they are always local. For the intragroup, again, you're right, exactly. Sometimes intragroup is more difficult than intergroup dialogue, because with intragroup, you probably have, you might have more history together, more suffering, more grievances. So it may be more difficult to reach out to intragroup members. And we experienced this. We have an officer in charge of intra-Muslim dialogue in America. And it is difficult. There are different branches, sub-traditions of Islam in America. The way they view democracy and authority, moral and political authority are different. The way, how liberal or conservative they are, these are differences. So interfaith dialogue sometimes may be more difficult, but it is equally necessary. It is equally important. Because violence of different forms can happen intrafaith. And more importantly, if there's going to be collaboration intrafaith, that requires dialogue. So that is absolutely necessary, not easier. It has to be done. It can be ignored sometimes. It may be ignored sometimes. Unfortunately, that's all I can say, because I also have a deadline. I'll try to say just a few words if for the next two questions, if we have time. Randall, is Randall next?
Yes. Am I audible?
Yes.
I'm a cultural activist working in Eastern India. So I wanted to, this is a more personal question about the pitfalls and fallacies, specifically the subconscious biases that we have, either as an individual or a collective belonging to a particular in-group. How do we work towards uncovering it ourselves and personally, or as a group, as an in-group, if you want to work towards?
Yeah. Subconscious bias is a big important topic in psychological research. There are tests to uncover subconscious biases, so you can actually go online and take some of those tests. But it's important to remember that just because you have a subconscious bias doesn't mean you're acting on it. This was a revelation that came later in the research. The tests were developed initially that revealed the subconscious biases. But then people realized that people always do not act on those biases because they have other elements in their formation, in their brain, in their psychology. The other elements may supersede or dominate those subconscious biases. So just having a subconscious bias doesn't make a person a bad person, or doesn't mean they are acting on it. We need to be careful about it. But it is possible to discover these through tests. Another way to discover them is if you can examine your life, the way you react to events or you react to people. If you can be an observer of yourself, you can discover that. Through dialogue, through genuine dialogue, on equal footing, respectful dialogue, people, without knowing, sometimes they surpass these biases. Let me tell you again a very quick story. When I was a graduate student in Chicago, I had a lab mate named Charles or Chuck, and he was married. They bought a home, and they have this thing called housewarming party. And he invited me to the party, and I went there, and he was introducing me to his friends. And he is saying that, Alp is from Turkey, my lab mate. One of his friends, when he first heard this, looked at me, and he said, these are his words. I did not forget. I was kind of mini shocked there. He said, yeah, you watch all those movies, and you think they cannot be all like that. This is what he said. He said, yeah, you watch all those movies, and you think they should not be all like that. So he had a preconception of Turks or Muslims from movies, and when he met me, I did not fit his preconception or prejudice or whatever, and he was surprised by that. So it is possible to detect them. We should definitely work on overcoming them if they are negative or unproductive. But just having them doesn't mean we are acting on them or somebody else is acting on them. We need to be careful about separating the two. Thank you. And is it Yıldız or Yıldız?
Hello. Yeah, it can be both Yıldız or Yıldız.
Okay.
So my question is, how do different, age groups vary to the receptiveness of dialogue, civic engagement? Because, for example, I'm from Kazakhstan, and we have huge generational gap between the people who rules the country and people who wants to do some civic engagement. And I see that as one of the main reasons of why in Central Asia exactly, the civic engagement is not as effective as, for example, in other countries. So if there is any researches made exactly on age groups, I would be very happy if you can share that, and maybe my group mates has that. And the question is just how it varies, age groups in dialogue.
Absolutely. The nature of the dialogue, the theme of the dialogue or civic engagement, the nature of the activity differs based on the age group. There are common shared themes and interests, but there are also different interests. I visited New Zealand a few years ago, and our partner there or friend organization there, they told us that in the younger generation group, they don't have interfaith dialogue because the youth there are not interested in interfaith dialogue. They are more interested in intercultural dialogue. So their activities are geared toward intercultural dialogue. In America, in our partner organizations, we see more interested in among the youth towards social causes, social justice, equality, inclusion, environment, women empowerment, diversity, equality area. So there are many projects that focus on those themes. As I mentioned in the beginning, whenever there is civic engagement, there is dialogue. So dialogue happens just as not as interfaith as a social responsibility project or social consciousness project. The best way to determine this is to actually survey, to ask your friends, your peers, what are the areas you're interested in, what kind of projects you would consider worth spending your time in. That is the best way. I'm sure there are studies. Unfortunately, I am not aware of them. I have not seen them, but I can tell you from personal experience that there is a difference in interest and the themes and the ways that the youth engage versus the more mature generation.
Thank you.
I hope everybody is satisfied with their queries and comments. Thank you so much, Professor and Dr. Aslandogan. Thank you so much for taking out your precious time and sharing your insights and enriching.
Thank you. I thank you for your time. Many of you spent almost more than 2 hours here. I hope it was worth it, and I wish the best for your studies and your work, both in this program and after you graduate for this program. And I also wish and pray for a peaceful India, peaceful world.
Thank you so much. sir. And I would like to tell everybody that sir has also been so kind and has taken previous sessions with the In Dialogue Foundation, and his video is available on YouTube. You can go and check it out. And with this, I would like to call it a day. And thank you so much, all the participants. And I hope you all have a lot of takebacks. I'll just quickly share my takeback for the day. I mean, I have 2 pages notes, but the one thing which really struck with my heart today, which I'm taking back, is that and since we know that charity begins at home, so from today, what I'm getting is that rewiring the brain is possible. So this is something which I'm going to tell myself, and I'll try to break the boundaries, which is subconscious biasness we were talking about. So I will begin it from myself, and then eventually I think we will see it in the environment prevailing. So thank you so much, everyone.